from you. It's very easy to make you an honorary gynecologist if you can have these 3 or 4 concepts in your mind, okay? So the first concept is that estrogen causes growth, all right? The only reason why you have a menstrual cycle is for you to get pregnant, for you to reproduce, for you to keep the civilization or the species going, okay? So every month your body is preparing for pregnancy, all right? So last month, if you didn't get pregnant, then estrogen comes around the first 2 weeks of the cycle and it regrows the tissue that you just shed, all right? Now you're supposed to ovulate. You're supposed to make an egg. The ovary is supposed to make an egg. When you ovulate, you begin to make progesterone. Progesterone promotes gestation. It organizes the tissue and it nourishes it so that if a fertilized egg comes into the uterus is prepared to nourish that fertilized egg, at least for the first 12 weeks until the placenta is formed. And then the placenta is the source of nourishment. Okay. So estrogen causes growth, progesterone causes normal development. All right. So when you have a hormone imbalance, what happens is usually ovulation gets distorted for some reason. Ovulation is a very sensitive procedure, okay? Everything has to be just right for you to make an egg, all right? Now, what happens is sometimes you don't make an egg. When you don't ovulate, ovulation is the menstrual timekeeper. 14 days after ovulation, if you don't get pregnant, you should have a period, all right? Now, if you don't ovulate, you don't make as much progesterone. Progesterone organizes the tissue and makes it ready to bleed, 14 days later. If you don't ovulate, 2 things happen. The estrogen causes an increased amount of growth and is disorganized. So now you have these irregular periods, and you have periods that, they happen every 10 days or, 14 days, or so you have an irregular cycle because you don't ovulate. Also, progesterone is an antidepressant, anti-anxiety hormone. Now, when do you get depressed and anxious? 1 to 2 weeks before your period, all right? Because you're not making enough progesterone, all right? This can happen, it especially happens in 2 areas. Puberty, because your ovary is trying to get the hang of ovulating. And it also happens in perimenopause and menopause because now your ovary is shutting down. It's starting to get out of the reproductive process. So those 2 times in your life is the most likely time you're going to have a hormone imbalance. Now, so how do you measure hormones if you don't measure it in the blood? I'm going to tell you how you actually measure hormones so you can make sure you're not anxious and depressed 2 weeks before your period, or you're not anxious or depressed during puberty and perimenopause, because that's when hormones can get out of balance. And how do you replace those hormones in a way that makes sense? Right? And now let's get to the nitty-gritty of this. So I told you what I used to do: birth control pills, antidepressants, surgery. And now you understand the menstrual cycle. Estrogen causes growth and progesterone causes normal development. Then how do you figure out what is what? Okay. So the reason why you can't measure hormones in the blood is because hormones are made from cholesterol. And so everybody has the idea that cholesterol is evil and you need to get rid of all your cholesterol. That's crazy. You need cholesterol in order to make your hormones. Okay. So cholesterol is fatty and your blood plasma is liquidy. If you ever seen your blood, it looks like, liquid. It's water. Now, fat and water, oil and water, they don't mix. Your hormones come out of your ovary and they're bound in this protein called sex hormone binding globulin. And you don't have to, sex hormone binding globulin, you don't have to remember that. But it's in this water soluble protein, and I call it a FedEx truck. Okay. So you put the package of hormone, estrogen, in the FedEx truck, and then you drive it around on the highway, which is the circulatory system. And now the FedEx trucks delivers it to your tissue. Okay. Now the tissue takes the hormone and it uses it. As long as it's in the truck, you can't do it. If you have a blender that's in the FedEx truck, you can't blend anything until you take it in your house. All right. So That's what happens. The sex hormone binding globulin carries it around, takes it to your uterus, to your breast, to your brain, and all these places. All right. Now, what happens is that you are not able to. So there may be 100 blenders on the FedEx truck, but there's only one in your house. Okay. The blood is counting the 100 packages that are in the FedEx truck. It has no idea how much is in your tissue. All right. So now let's say that you have 3 packages in your tissue and you only needed 2 packages, but they're delivering 3 packages every day. All right. What happens is that those packages in the tissue can keep building up, and you can have too much in the tissue and the blood doesn't show any change because it's only looking at how many are in the FedEx truck. It didn't know that it had one extra that was going into the tissue every day and it was starting to build up. So you could have 4 packages of estrogen and you only got 2 packages of progesterone, or maybe you got none because you didn't ovulate. Now your periods are all crazy. You look at your blood and you say, hey, the FedEx trucks look fine. What's wrong with you? Okay. Now, here's the great thing. The saliva gland has fat tissue around it. And that's one of the places where the hormone gets delivered. Okay. Now, if you know what the normal range of the hormone that should be in the saliva, you can assume that not only did the saliva get the right amount, excuse me, but your uterus, your brain, and your other tissues got the right amount too. And if you know what the balance is that it should be between those two, you can say, okay, if the saliva gland shows me that, hey, there's the right amount of estrogen, there's the right amount of progesterone, all right, everything is in balance. Or if it shows that one is out of balance or the other is out of balance, then if you have too little estrogen and too much progesterone, you can do this, all right? Or the other way around, you can do this. It's easy. You cannot manage what you cannot measure. You have to be able to measure it to order to balance it. Okay. So we can look in the saliva and we can see what the tissue level of the hormone is, because that's where the action is. That's where you're blending. Okay. If they gave you a blender, you're not blending on the FedEx truck, you're blending in your house or your tissue. So we want to know what's going on in there. All right. Now, once we know what's going on in there, and if we replace it with the same hormone that your ovaries should have made, now we're back in balance. All right. Now your periods are back in balance. You're not overgrowing tissue like in fibroids or polyps or things like that. You are back in balance. Now you're not anxious and depressed 2 weeks before your period. You know, everything is back in balance. Your body seeks balance. That is the most important. It's always trying to get back in balance. And once that gets back in balance, a lot of other things get back in balance. Estrogen not only causes growth of the tissue in the lining of the uterus, it causes growth in the breast tissue. And that tissue, when it's not developed properly, that is cancer. Same thing in the uterus. Okay. Estrogen also stores fat, and progesterone helps you to burn fat for energy. There's always a balancing act between almost anything in nature. Okay. So the reason why kids gain weight in puberty is because they can have too much estrogen, okay, and not enough progesterone because they didn't ovulate. Same thing in perimenopause. Ask any woman over 45 or 50. I won't say any woman, the majority of women. They'll tell you that prior to and during menopause, all of a sudden they lost control of their weight. They're doing the same thing they did before, and now they're 20 pounds heavier. And no matter what they do, they cannot get that weight off. Because here's an important point. You cannot diet and exercise your way past a hormone problem. Okay? If you have a hormone problem, I don't care if you eat like a bird and do CrossFit 24/7. You're probably going to gain weight because you've stressed out your body so much. Your body can't produce the right amount of cortisol, so you begin to even gain more weight. All right. So I will tell you that most of the time, the number 1 and 2 reason why a woman comes to me because they're frustrated because the doctor keeps telling them they're okay, is that they are unable to lose weight, and they're not able to sleep. Okay, so that's estrogen causing the fat to store up, and then the progesterone is not there to burn the fat, and it's also not there to calm down their anxiety at night. And these women will say, hey, I just can't turn my brain off at night. It's very hard for me to go to sleep. You can give that, if we see that that's out of balance, if you get those back in balance, they can control their weight again, they can sleep again, and then all these other things start to get better.